tells my life in a few pages, I feel like. How many of you know, in the beginning of the Bible, God put Adam in a garden? And it just kind of resonated with me that we're all kind of gardeners in some way or another. We all have things in our lives that we prune. We all have things in our lives that we take care of. And just like in that garden, we have some things in our lives that we're not supposed to touch. But this is just a little bit about that in my life. I think it's awesome how God placed Adam in a garden. And though he literally placed him there, I believe there's a significant spiritual depth there that is so rich. I believe each one of us is a spiritual gardener. We've been placed by God into a specific garden to grow in and to tend to. And there are things that we nurture, and there are things that we prune. There are weeds that we pull, and there are places that we till and plant. And just like with Adam, God walks with us in a garden. He's given us things to enjoy and to eat the fruit of. And just like Adam, he's placed things in the garden that are off limits. This fact is a little bit hard to grasp at first. Like, why would God do this? Some think it's so God can tempt us. But I know that's not true because the Word of God says that he doesn't do that. But what he does is allow us the opportunity to obey. He gives us the opportunity to trust him and to choose him. So here we are in our garden, and it's meant to be beautiful, productive, fulfilling, and a fruitful place. And we're meant to keep it that way. And I didn't keep mine very well. Yes, I went to church, and yes, I watered and nurtured some things, and I read the Word, and I prayed. But I also brought some things into to temporarily enjoy that took root. Simple things that I had no idea would grow so fast or root so deep. They began to choke out other important things that were vital to my nutrition and to my garden. The weeds had places to grow that were beyond my sight, hidden by the out-of-control addition I'd allowed within my gates and garden walls. Small foxes and rodents began climbing the sinful ivy that now cascaded over and down the protective borders, and my God-given garden gradually became a place that was no longer delightful. I didn't want to be in my garden anymore. It seemed beyond repair, so I searched and found another garden. And it looked so in season, so pleasurable. It even had the things that I'd brought into my garden, but they seemed to grow differently. It was springtime in this new garden, and it smelled so good. Everything was new and exciting, and there were plants I'd never seen before, and others I'd heard of that had bad reputations, but they seemed a lot more enjoyable than people said. This garden was different, and nothing was off limits. Even the poisonous plants were said to be okay if I had just a little. And I ate of all the fruit. All my senses were invigorated. I saw everything. I listened to everything. I tasted everything. I touched everything. And I took in the fresh aroma all around. And as spring ended and summer settled in, so did I. The fresh aroma was gone because what had been new was now established and became everyday for me. I had now officially moved and taken residency in this newer garden. And it was so pleasurable in the spring, but now the resources were kind of drying up. And I hadn't worked because I was so busy enjoying everything. And now it's really hot. And it's really wearing me down. And there's no big oak tree for shade like I had in my God-given garden. And there's not even protection from the storms. But there was a little bit of fruit left, although it wasn't fresh like it was in the spring. In fact, it had started to rot. And gnats and fruit flies were becoming so thick that the majority of my energy went to keeping them from the remainder of my fruit, at least what I had decided was mine. Along came fall, a season rightly named, might I add, because everything I had enjoyed began to fall away. And one by one, the leaves of friendship, worth, self-esteem dropped to the ground as the winds of self-destruction carried off my livelihood. Winter was lonely, and I was surrounded by the true identity of the garden, no longer covered in leaves of promise and flowers of glitz and glamour. The raw branches were exposed, along with all the thorns and thistles. It was a miserable time, and I couldn't go anywhere without the pain of all the overgrown thorns. I needed it to be spring again. When would spring be here? I filled my mind with the memories of spring, and it helped me to wait. And then spring arrived. But it was nothing like I'd remembered, because I was now surrounded by everything that I had sown over the past year. I'd forgotten that we are always sowing. I tried to nurture and water the things that had made the garden enjoyable, but they were dead. How could I have known that they were seasonal and not annual? I found myself in desperation. How could I live with what I've sown? It's all I have to eat. There's no nutrients in it. There's no substance to it. And to top it all off, there's not even any water to wash down the horrible and bitter taste. And thoughts of home began to flood my mind, and I finally got up and went back to my God-given garden. I was so happy to be home, because even though my garden was still a mess, it was better than the deceitful one that I'd left and made a mess of. I did some work, even though there was a lot to be done, and I enjoyed the company of my garden companions, especially the Lord. But before too long, the seasons in my God-given garden were changing, as they always do. And winter can be hard, even though it's temporary. So I looked out at my gates, and there it was again. Springtime in that other garden. How did it come alive again? But there was no time for questions. I was off and back to this mystical garden. And I noticed right away that what I had sown was still there. But it was mostly ignored thanks to the other things growing around. But once more, it all happened again. A rerun, but now played in high definition. Back and forth I went, my sin-season cycle. I'd become a horrible, hurtful, lazy, undependable gardener who could not be trusted. I had trained myself to run any place where it was springtime. Then one day, after coming home once again to my God-given garden, the garden giver himself spoke to me. And he said, "Stop running from winter. I need you to see winter for what it is. You need the color gone so that you can see things in black and white. Winter is when the roots grow deeper so that the plants grow longer and the trees grow taller. And it is not a time of death, but it's a time of depth. I want to cover you like snow, and my warmth will cause goodness to water you and to nourish you. This is where I am, under the covering, pulling weeds and preparing to work with the Lord as we make this garden beautiful." God showed me that sin will always be in its pleasurable season somewhere. That's the only time Satan will ever present it. He wants to conceal the fact that it's only pleasurable for a season, because he knows that the rotten side of it, the dead side, would push people away rather than pull them in. Because no one goes to the store to buy rotten fruit. People don't flock to Home Depot for dormant plants. People don't look at a crackhead who's sick and homeless and without and say, "I want that." They don't look at a man who started with pornography and ended up losing his wife, his home, and job and say, "I want that." They are drawn during a pleasurable season. I thank God for allowing me to see seasons of sin that lead to death. I'm more grateful that he rescued me and welcomed me home so that I can be restored. You see, I'm not just in a garden. I am an oak tree, an oak of righteousness to display God's splendor. I'm now like a tree planted by rivers of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither, ready in season and out, with a promise to prosper.